YouTube. So today I wanted to show you all this 2000 Mercedes-Benz E320, known as the W210 chassis of the E-Class. This is probably one of the last examples of the classic Mercedes-Benz. Production ran from '96 all the way up to 2002 for the sedan version, 2003 for the wagon. There were all sorts of engines under the hood of the W210. Depending what country you lived, you'll get either supercharged 4-cylinders, inline 6s, V6s, V8s, even diesels. And it was with the W210 that Mercedes began to take risks in terms of styling, adding more curves and different shapes. I mean, look at the headlamps. You have 4 ovals and a, for the most part, rectangular grille. And that created mixed feelings. You either hated or loved this car. Ask any Mercedes fanatic of how they feel about the styling of the W210 and feelings will be mixed. It's a 50-50. Most would say that they prefer the chiseled and timeless looks of the W124, which was the predecessor. It was obvious that Mercedes was trying to give this car a big identity, and they did so. Before the Kia Amante and Jaguar S-Type hit the roads, you'd know that you were looking at a Mercedes E-Class, distant in your rearview mirror. This one's rocking the 17-inch AMG Sport wheels. These actually came from my 02 E430. This car originally came with the standard 16-inch wheels. Those were mounted on my old C230, which I sold. Now for the US market, the W210 E320 has forever been the entry model. This one has the entry 3.2-liter V6, which makes 221 horsepower. Now if you wanted a little bit more, then step up to the E430, which had a 4.3-liter V8 that made 275 horsepower. Now if you wanted to go all out, there's the E55, and that had a 5.4-liter V8 that made 349 horsepower. And that was as good as you can get. And these were the engines of choice from '98 to 2002. Very spacious trunk. Unfortunately, the seats do not fold down, and I don't believe that was ever an option for the W210 sedan because the fuel tank is right back here. Let me see. There you go, you can just see the upper side of the fuel tank. Sorry for all that knocking around, but that's the upper end of the fuel tank right there. It's actually a very safe place to be. The spare tire is right down here. Tools, full-size spare, so you're not gonna have to deal with a donut. And the aftermarket CD changer. Once inside, you'll immediately see that this is not what you'd want to call a very stylish interior, and if anything, it's kind of bland, but it is minimalist and functional. With all the curves and whatnot in the exterior of this car, you'd expect a more rounded out or more modern looking interior, and you really don't get that here. Still not a bad place to be, and for the car's size, this is a very spacious cabin, super wide seats, perfect for the typical American frame. Soft touch materials and woodwork throughout. Now on the door panel, everything is soft to the touch. You have the controls here to the seat, memory for up to 3 settings, and that T-shaped button is for the tilt telescoping function for the steering wheel. Usual mumbo jumbo of Mercedes of this era. Basically have this little chode which you insert into this slot. One thing many of these cars suffer from is cracked dashboards. Fortunately, this one doesn't have that issue, but many of them tend to crack like around this section and above the airbag cover because this dashboard is so soft it's almost like cake. So if the dashboard to your W210 is in great condition, and at this age, try not to press hard on it because you may very well break it. Down the center stack, we have a variety of different controls and functions here. This is to tumble the rear headrests. 1, 2, 3. Door locks, and this is the tow sensor. Basically deactivates the anti-theft alarm system from activating when the car is being towed away or jacked. This is the dual zone automatic climate control. Now the cool thing is, even though this is a 2000 car, you can still independently change the airflow on the passenger and driver's side. You see here, you have a selection on each side. So aside from temperature, you can adjust the airflow, not the fan speed. AM, FM, and cassette. Also has a CD changer, which was optional. Somebody put in an aftermarket CD changer in the trunk, so you have to use a radio station to work with it. Also has a cool feature called Weather Band.
It's 1993. Effective. Melbourne, Florida.
There you
on a
go.
Frequency of
I do wonder who the hell listens to this, but I guess it can be useful. This one also has the Bose audio system. I believe it has 8 speakers. It's not a bad system. It's okay. This is how you tumble the little door for the cassette deck. There you go. I've always thought that was pretty cool. This is horrible if you end up, if you're the type who ends up using those cassette adapters. It's just useless with this radio. It is workable, but it's a pain in the ass. Trust me, I have tried. Here is a little cubby, but there's also the little display or the little controller for the aftermarket CD changer. Otherwise, this would be an empty cubby. And the ashtray, cigarette lighter right there. Now, on later years, there were double-din setups where this car had a navigation system, so it would occupy this cubby as well. It would be one massive block here. The 5-speed automatic, the 722.6 gearbox. Mercedes used this transmission in just about everything. Solid gearbox was used in their 4, 6, 8, supercharged 8, and V12 cars. Even the Sprinter van. Now, one of the updates to 2000 was the addition of manual shift mode. You see how you wiggle it side to side to select the gears? 99 and prior, you had drive, 4, 3, 2, and first gear. So it was like a big zigzag, and here they took that away. Gives it a little bit of a modern look, adds a little sportier feel. This is to activate the electronic stability control / traction control. All 4 windows have auto up and down functions, child locks. This is to pop the trunk and the power mirrors. There would be a cup holder in here, but in the W210 or any Benzes of this era, the cup holder's just broke. Really hard to find one of these cars with a functional cup holder. And here is the center console armrest. It is padded, has 2 levels. This is the upper level and the lower level. This car originally had a car phone. You can see how somebody just cut the wire right there. And this cubby can be used as a little chill box. Now there's AC flowing in here, so you can throw in a fruit or maybe a bottled water. It'll keep it a little bit chilled, but it will reduce the airflow to the vents for the rear passengers. The steering wheel is very thick, and that's about it. Here are all the controls for the radio, hands-free controls, and for the little info display right there. You'll get all sorts of information, as you can see. I'm not going to go through all of it because it's just a lot. Cruise control, the wipers, monoblade wiper. I always thought that was so cool. And again, the steering wheel tilts and telescopes. The headlights, pull for the front fogs, pull a second time for the rear fogs. And if you just want to illuminate just the left or rear side of the parking lights, you can do so while the car is off. I always found that kind of useless, so I don't see why anybody would use that. The rearview mirror dims and also has the HomeLink / universal garage door opener. This is for roadside assistance. Useless nowadays, but it just looks like a little, I don't know, little countdown switch to make this car explode or something. It just looks kind of dangerous to push, kind of like you're going to launch a nuclear weapon. Sunroof, self-explanatory, also tilts as well. And I like how these cars had these vents here, so you could tilt the sunroof and still make this car breathe without having to open this thing. Helps reduce heat. Back seat is a spacious place to be, very comfortable. I'm 6'1", I have the seat adjusted to where I prefer, and there's more than enough legroom, and they designed this perfectly back here. The back side's the front seat, so your knees have even more room. Again, I have plenty of room here, and I wouldn't mind sitting back here for hours and hours and hours. Thigh support is really good, and you won't melt because you also have vents, AC vents here. It's just a continuation of the airflow to the front seat, so it's not the strongest thing, but hey, you have something. Some circulation back here. The armrest is pretty interesting. Nicely padded, entire thing. Pull gently forward, your cup holders. Pull a little bit harder, first aid kit. In the past, They would build the first aid kit into the rear deck, which I thought was a very stupid decision because the first aid kit and the medical supplies inside would take a lot of heat, toasting everything inside. Now, qualities of the door panel are identicals up front. Absolutely everything is padded, including the insides of the door pocket. We do have the additions of this ashtray. There's a look at the very dirty 3.2 liter V6. This is known as the M112. This is Mercedes-Benz's first generation of V6 engines, and it ended up being one of their most reliable. The generation that succeeded this had so many issues. This one, it's just a matter of doing oil changes and changing the valve cover gaskets every 100,000 miles as they get leaky. The power band is really good, and it's a lot faster than you'd think. Single overhead cam setup, 3 valves per cylinder, and it has dual spark plugs, so this car has 12 spark plugs. Already hitting 50 miles an hour. That wasn't wide open throttle, and this car scooted along nicely. You wouldn't think it, but the V6, it's pretty nice to listen to. And it's more responsive than you would think. Although still the E430 is the way to go, and if you can get an E55, go for that too. Sorry, Mirage. Now the thing with the W210 E-Class is that this is still a fairly classic example of Mercedes-Benz. It's not a whole lot different to the products they used to build, you know, in the 80s, 90s. Development of this car commenced in the late 80s, and everything for the most part is still a conventional design. From the suspension setup, steering, transmission, and just overall the way the car was constructed. I'm rolling on a fairly bumpy road, and you know, this thing does a phenomenal job just absorbing everything. This thing is like a cloud, even though it doesn't have any fancy suspension setups. This is still a regular coil spring suspension system. Watch the monoblade wiper work. Going 70 already. And even though this is a large, soft, bouncy car, it's still very planted on corners. What are you doing? 50 miles an hour in this cloverleaf. I'm overtaking this G37. Bye-bye. Going 60 miles an hour on this cloverleaf. My W210 C230 compressor could not do that. It was very jittery at that speed. Miles an hour. It doesn't seem like it. And this is where this car is home. These cars were designed to travel on the Autobahn at over 100 miles an hour. If anything, these cars drive better at over 100 miles an hour than under. You know, this is just the perfect cruiser. Especially if you're in Florida where the roads are straight and smooth. You know, this is just home base. Now, if you wanted something that was a little bit more sport-oriented, you want to go for the BMW 5 Series of this era. You know, if you want to take corners at high speed, that's really the car you'd want to be in, not so much these. Mercedes usually delivers a sporty-ish ride in any of their cars with a sport trim. Even if you were, if it was a car with an adaptive suspension system and you put on sport mode, the ride would still be very floaty. Now, I do recommend these cars because this is the last generation of E-Class where things were still on the simpler side. After the new generation, which came out in 03, those cars really became more complicated, at least more electrically complicated, more sensors that could fail, and the build quality wasn't all that great either. I thought the interiors in those were far more chitsy. Those cars handle so much better comparable to a BMW. The W210, again, one of the last classic examples of Mercedes-Benz where it just wasn't overly complicated. And if you want something that's on the dependable-ish side, yeah, I'd look at these. California, Florida car, no rust at all. Prime example, in this thing, 93,000 miles, despite being 17 years old, it's got so much life ahead of it. And I do recommend them if you can find one in decent shape. I will follow up with my 2002 E430 Sport, and I will show you just how much better and different that car is. So anyways, YouTube, thanks for watching, and hope you all enjoyed this tour.